All right. Welcome, everybody, to this live stream, which puts us under a little bit more pressure today for the Back to the Future webinar. As many of you know, I'm a massive fan of Back to the Future. Personally think I'm a little bit Marty McFly. You can be the doc, the crazy doc. Joined in the studio today with Daniel Pym from Loan Market, one of the directors. So fantastic to have you here. And thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking all things property, rates, migration, and we're going to be answering, of course, those million-dollar questions. When is the right time to buy? When should I be putting my foot into the property pool and getting involved? And hopefully we can bring some clarity to that. So first of all, thanks, Dan. Welcome. Great to have you here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, cool. So people always ask me, they say, when is the best possible time to buy a property? And as you can see on screen right now, the best possible time would have been probably 30 years ago. House and unit prices in the last 30 years over 500% up. So yeah, it would have been a fantastic time for any of you on this call. If you were 30 years ago to have got into the market, you'd be killing it right now. But unless you've got a DeLorean time machine, which I certainly don't, I don't think Dan has either, we can't go back. So what we will do though is let's jump in the time machine and let's just go back to around March 2020, the pandemic, COVID. And Dan, as you can see on the screen, interest rates went down to, what was it, 0.1%?
The official cash rate, yeah. I mean, we had clients that were fixing their home loans for 1.79%.
Wow.
Which was wild.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, we've still got a few clients on 1.99% fixed rates that go through to January next year. So still a few lucky clients out there.
Wow. And that'll bump up a little bit, I'm sure, from there.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, just a bit. And so not only did rates come all the way down, but, you know, with JobKeeper and Job Finder and all of those other things, you know, inflation really started to get out of control, as you can see. And, you know, the Reserve Bank likes to target sort of 2 to 3% for inflation. It got as high as, I think it was 7.8% at one point. And that played havoc with the market, not only just the retail market, but of course, with COVID, we shut our borders, labor was kicked out, you know, a lot of the labor that works on the work sites, supply chain shortages around the world. And so as you can see, construction costs went absolutely crazy. I mean, weren't you building during that time?
I was building during COVID, and luckily I had a fixed price contract.
Wow.
But even with fixed price contracts, builders were going broke all the time. So I did manage to get the build done, and I'm not really keen to ever do it again.
Yeah, I'm sure it's scarred for life, right? But as you can see on the screen, I mean, you know, building costs, which averaged around sort of, you know, 4% growth per annum over the last decade, eventually got as high as 25%. And that had a huge impact, particularly on, you know, new apartments looking to come out of the ground and developers being hellishly gun shy to launch. And as you can see, approvals and completions, approvals is the gray line you're seeing on the screen, and the yellow is completions, just started to plummet.
Yeah.
And just no stock in the market.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that go through and get their approvals, and then when they look at the numbers about what's it actually going to take when they get to the quoting stage, the projects either just don't stack up because the construction costs are so high, or the repayments at the end of the day are just too high.
Yeah,
so
100%.
It really slows things down.
All right, so it doesn't look great, does it? We'll jump back in the DeLorean now and come back to 2024. And I think let's just have a look at where are we in the market right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of people that, you know, think one thing or another. Maybe we can start with, obviously, the cash rate went from those plummeting levels.
Yeah.
Fastest rate rise in history.
16 rate rises.
Wow.
Rates increased by 4%. I mean, I think clients should be pretty upset with the Reserve Bank, because they said during the peak of COVID that rates won't go up till 2024. I think a lot of people listened to that, unfortunately, and maxed out their borrowing capacity, bought the dream home with really cheap repayments. And then, unfortunately, if you didn't fix the rates, the repayments have pretty much doubled for these clients. So there's definitely been some pain there. And, you know, I hope that we're at the end of that journey now, and that we can, you know, expect some rates to come down sometime next year.
Good. I'm going to come back to that with you, because I think everybody wants to know that. I think at the same time, you know, if you look at consumer confidence, which is one of the biggest drivers in the property market, it's been at an all-time low. It's actually hit the same levels as the GFC. Some of our young first-home buyers may not remember that, but I certainly do. But, you know, you can see it there in March 20, absolutely plummeting, picked up a bit, and then it's really been in the doldrums ever since. Are you seeing that in the market?
Yeah, I think we're in a holding pattern. A lot of people, especially where my office is, they tend to sit on the sidelines when there's a market like this. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to last forever. There's still, people get on, they've got to get on with life. First home buyers have got to buy. You know, kids grow up and move out of home, so people look to downsize. People that have managed to pay off their loan, go and buy investment properties. So there's still activity in the market, but I think we are just waiting for rates to come down, and I think we'll see that people jump back in.
Yeah, I think so. What's interesting to note, however, is if you actually have a look, is during the pandemic, obviously we closed our borders, and Australia's population growth relies on net migration, right? So obviously some people leave, some people come in, but the net, and over the past decade, we've averaged around 250,000 net migration. We went down to practically zero during the pandemic, and now last year it was 450,000. It's projected to be over 400,000 this year and for the next couple of years. That's a lot of people coming in.
Yeah, I think if you ask the average Aussie, that's something that really concerns them, because they know that that's pushing up demand for property and demand for rentals, and people that are already here they're going to feel the impact of higher rents and higher property prices.
Yeah. We obviously at Ray White, we sell a lot to first and second generation migrants, and what we are actually also starting to notice is that we're starting to see a slightly wealthier migrant coming into this country. An interesting graph here from Matusich shows it's a global map there, and anything in red is millionaires leaving their country. So you can see a lot of millionaires leaving India, China, the UK, and Russia. And the blue circles are where migrant millionaires are emigrating to. And what's interesting to note there is Australia is the #1 destination for, let's call them millionaire migrants, followed by the UAE.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see, larger purchases from the first generation migrants?
I think anyone I've got an office in Northwest Sydney. I think anyone that's going to the auctions there, they do see that, some of these, young migrants come in and just outbid everyone and perhaps not need a loan. So we're definitely seeing a bit of that. Australia is a great destination to live and to work and to own property.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody wants the blue sky, the fresh water, the clean air. But what is interesting is that what we've seen over the past decade is that the majority of the net migration comes into New South Wales, which you can see on screen now there with the yellow bar far and above Victoria, Queensland. But what's interesting actually is the next slide's even more interesting. So this is a chart from Charter Keck Kramer. And what this shows is in their first 20 years, where does a migrant live? And the green lines that you can see on the top there is a migrant either renting an apartment or owning an apartment. And in the first 5 years, nearly 70% of migrants are looking for an apartment as their primary destination. With house prices having gone the way they've gone, I think we were talking earlier. What did you say the average house price in Sydney was now?
I think it's around 2 to 2.2 million.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And the average apartment?
I think it's about 1.1 million for an apartment.
Wow.
Yeah. I think to your point, Sydney's that basin. You've got, west out to the Blue Mountains, and you've got the Central Coast and down to Wollongong. And due to affordability, I think that they're going to start to fill in these suburbs, and it's going to be much harder to buy a house on land close to the city. It's going to be apartment living. And that's what you see when you travel around. You go overseas and all the cities are jam-packed with apartments, and there's no house on 700-meter block.
Yeah, that's for sure. Speaking of affordability, that's a key point here. How has sort of 16 rate rises and the fastest rate rise we've seen on record, how has that impacted people's borrowing capacity?
Borrowing capacity has gone down dramatically. I'd say around 40% from the peak. Yeah. So I think we were talking before. We had a client recently. It really sticks out because they're a young lawyer. They've got no student loan, no debts, got a great deposit, and earning what you'd think is a good income, $150,000 a year. And when you look at their borrowing capacity, it was around the 700,000 mark.
No way.
And it was like, wow, that's a real problem, because you can't go to uni and work your tail off to get a really good degree and then take a job in town where all the law firms are and earn good income and then not be able to live anywhere near where you work.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you aspire to this when the dream of owning a property can be really difficult?
Yeah. I've seen it, people that sort of got pre-approval 6, 7, 8 months ago are coming into the market now, and they still think they can get $1 million, but 6, 7 months later, that's like 800,000 or 750,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really hard. I think, buying on your own is really hard, or single parents is really hard to borrow, because when you take into account living expenses and interest rates where they are, it just doesn't get you much. And that's the big downside for Sydney. Everything's so expensive, and I think that's what sort of fuels people's desire to get out of Sydney, or to do their rent vesting. It's something that was never spoken about in the past, but these days when we talk to clients, if they can't afford to buy something to live in, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't get in the market. A lot more of them are talking about investing in areas, in other states where you can buy a place for 400, 500,000.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Sydney's crazy. Interestingly, if we now look at the current situation and the graph on screen, you can see that, the population growth is your black line, and that's just climbing. Unfortunately, we've got a declining yellow line, which is the dwelling completions. So, for those of you that aren't familiar with, the terminology, that is the number of new apartments or new homes coming onto the market. And this is a real problem, because more and more people coming into the country, more and more people looking primarily for apartments, because that's what they traditionally would go for.
Yeah.
But also that's pretty much now all they can afford.
Yeah.
But we got a real problem in that we're not building enough apartments, and there's now a double whammy, because it's not just increased migration that's placing that extra demand, but actually, if you have a look now, I mean, this is national vacancy rates up on screen, and I mean, that's pretty much a Red Bull downhill run there.
Yeah. I talked to a few developers, and back in the day, they would turn a project around from start to completion in 18 months. They'd go and buy a site, they'd get the DA approval, they'd fund it, they'd build it, they'd sell it. Next project is 18 months to 2 years down the track. And what they have to do now is they have to, first of all, they can't borrow money at the start of the project, because the project takes 5 years now. So they've got to hold on to these projects and do less of them, because they have to use all their cash to hold on to it. And then by the time it gets through council and then build, it's 5 years later. So I think that's a legitimate concern. Even when I just did a knockdown rebuild for my house, it took 13 months for the council to approve the DA on a fully complying development.
Yeah.
So when you start to do these multi-story unit blocks, it's a headache.
It's a big problem. And not only are we seeing decreasing vacancy rates, but you have to have been living under a rock to have not seen the rental increase that's taken place in Australia since the pandemic. Graph on the left is showing kind of a cumulative growth in rents. The graph on the right shows it's across all states.
Yeah, I was trying to rent a property because we knocked our house down during COVID, and you would go in there and beg for it, and you'd offer to pay the full 6 or 12 months up front. And I ended up having to pay $1,000 a week rent for a townhouse, and then the neighbor with an identical property who was also renting was only paying $760 a week.
Yeah, wow.
So you can see the supply and demand takes effect, and it's been quite distressing for tenants out there to get priced out of suburbs where they've got a community, and it's tough.
And are you seeing on your side, particularly being one of the biggest sort of loan providers, are you seeing mum and dad getting more involved and trying to, because the feedback we get in the market from the buyers is that we're seeing a lot more first home buyer activity right now, a lot more. It was mostly owner occupier. Now it's being dominated by first home buyers. And what we're finding is that they're coming really from two cohorts. The one is, I've been living with mum and dad are like, you have to get into the property market and we'll help you. Yeah. On the other side, it's, I've been renting, my rent's gone up 10%, 10%. I can't deal with this anymore. I think there might be more value if I can scrounge a deposit together to actually get into the market. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. I think parents know that, owning a home is a big life goal, and seeing their kids have somewhere to, they can live and call their own is really important. We're seeing, a lot of parents that are in a position to help out with a really good deposit. That's fantastic. We're also seeing a lot more loans where the kids can use the equity in their parents' property, those sort of family guarantee loans. And what that really helps is that means that the first home buyers don't necessarily even have to save for a deposit. We'll look after them while they save. There's guarantor loans out there where they can instead of having to save for a deposit. There's some government relief, but to be honest, when a median unit price in Sydney is 1.1 million. saves the stamp duty on first home buyers up to 800,000. It's like, well, what can you actually buy? Dollars, first home buyers are paying the full stamp duty, which is like $40,000. So look, to be honest, I think the state government could do a lot more. I think, to be honest, the federal government's got a scheme that actually really helps first home buyers, which is the one where if you come up with a 5% deposit, they'll do a deposit guarantee for the rest. And that really helps clients because they get a cheaper rate when the government guarantees a loan, and they don't have to pay any of that expensive mortgage insurance.
Yes.
The real challenge for first home buyers, which are a real part of the market, is that it's at a time when their earnings are low. They're probably just starting out in their career, and buying on your own is really difficult. So you need to have a partner to do it, or a sibling, like brother or sister. And we've seen parents go to the nth degree to help them and actually go and buy a property with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what's required to get into the market.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it still concerns me with my kids who, quite young at the moment, 10 years old. How are they going to get into the market in 20 years' time? If it keeps going the way it's going without the help of a parent, right?
I think, parents realize at some stage, okay, we're living in this suburb, we've got our place, we're doing all right, but where are the kids going to live?
That's true.
They're going to live miles away, just due to affordability. So, even to be honest, that's apartment living can help with that. If a house is 2.2 million and an apartment's 1.1 million, that's probably why we're going to see that trend grow with more apartment living.
Yeah, we see that too. Okay, and then the last thing we just wanted to comment on at the moment is just the current state of loans. We've seen it declining over the last 2 years. I mean, people got really gun shy when the rates were going up month on month on month. What are you seeing? Are you seeing any green shoots in the market right now? Are we seeing a return maybe of investors?
The first positive sign I think we saw a few months ago was fixed rates really came down. Fixed rates were at least at the same rate as variable rates, and we've seen now you can fix for nearly 0.5% below, a third to 0.5% below the variable rate. So that's a bit of a leading indicator that rates are going to come down, in my opinion. And I think we're probably we're expecting that next year. I mean, I believe it's Westpac. Their official, prediction is 3 rate reductions next year.
Wow.
Hopefully, we're sort of expecting that to take place, the first one anywhere from February to May next year. And I think we're all sort of just hanging out for it. Investors it's really hard for investors to get into the market. The investors that have got, a few properties have really high costs. Land tax is expensive, interest rates are expensive. And really a property only has a rent return of 2.5%, and interest rates are 6 or 6.5%. So it's investors are definitely out there. We've got a lot of clients that we're refinancing and renegotiating their rates to get a good deal, and we're looking at any strategy that works to help first home buyers get in the market. I think that's going to continue, and I think that if we can get a bit of that confidence back in the market, and if the public can believe that we're at the peak and that rates actually start coming down, I think that that's going to make the market kick on again, because there's huge supply. So there's huge demand and not much supply.
That's for sure. Well, that's a great segue into, let's actually jump into the DeLorean again, and let's go to the future. I think this is what most people wanted from today. Everybody wants to know what's going on, when's the right time to buy, what's happening to rates. So let's start with, you can see on screen now, it's actually about a month or two delayed here, but you can see that the yellow is your annual change in inflation rate and the white is the quarterly change. It seems to be trending in the right direction. The latest results show that it still continues to come down. We know that the US has cut rates. I think New Zealand have cut rates.
New Zealand.
So inflation's trending in the right direction. You've just sort of touched on forward rates, fixed rates coming down. I suppose the big prediction that, put you on the spot is kind of, where do you see rates maybe heading to, and when could we maybe expect a rate cut?
Yeah, I think I used to believe that it would be February, and I think it could be as late as May. I think the Reserve Bank typically increase rates really late. So they leave it to the last minute and then go, really high.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately they leave it to the last minute to drop rates too. So that's why the consumer sentiment's down. They're waiting until they're sure that inflation's under control before they drop rates. So I think, anywhere from 0.75% to 1% rate reduction next year by the end of the year is my prediction. And I think that's going to make the property market kick, because there's a lot of people that they want to do something, but they just can't get the money at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my next question to you is, if rates do start to come down, do you see the property market really kicking? Is there potentially then going to be sort of a stampede of demand of people that have maybe sat on the sidelines now gone, look, we think it's on its way down, but we're not going to act until it does?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See a bit of a stampede, maybe even a boom market coming at some point.
If the demand is still there and the supply is low and the money's cheaper, I mean, it's not rocket science.
Well,
pretty straightforward.
Let's talk about the demand. So this is a graph now on screen showing Sydney's population growth over the next sort of 20 years. What's interesting to note is the dotted red line is the city of Sydney as a whole. But really, if you look at the green and the black line, that's Parramatta and Blacktown. What that shows me is that not only are we going to see more migrants coming into New South Wales and into Sydney, but particularly into the western suburbs of Sydney. What this talks to is continued growth from a demand perspective, particularly for apartments. But the worrying fact for most buyers should be what's on the next graph here, which is, this is from Charter Keck Kramer. And what this is showing there is there's 3 levels of population growth. At the lowest predicted population growth, which is ridiculous because at the moment, New South Wales is getting about 120,000 a year. So it's almost half. Look at the gap between, the lowest population growth and the supply coming online, both build to sell and build to rent. And there's nothing there.
I think the new dwellings completed last year nationally was about 120,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. There, is it? And like the pipeline, these buildings don't just pop up.
No.
It takes years.
And like you said, with all the red tape right now, it's not an 18-month process anymore. It's 4 to 5 years.
It is. Yeah.
Well, this year, actually, the New South Wales state government came out with their housing accord. And this is a really shocking graph. And surely anybody sitting on the fence right now, take note of this. What you've got there is essentially the number of actual completions per 1,000 people over the last, 30 years. That black line shows you the average 2005 to 2023. And then those black pillars on the end, that is the amount of supply needed to bring on just to keep vacancy rates where they are and then meet the New South Wales housing accord. That's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. No.
I can't see that happening. And so, for those of you out there that are looking at this going, well, what does this mean in layman's terms? What this essentially means is demand is going to continue to increase through migration and through first home buyers and renters coming out of that market.
Yeah.
So there's insatiable demand moving into what could be a rate declining environment.
Yeah.
With no stock.
Yeah.
So if we just go back to, and I can't remember when I was at university, but we did Economics 101 and it was, that basic demand and supply graph. If demand continues to go up, access to capital goes down, but there is no more supply. Is this really what we expect even in the apartment market over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's a crazy graph, isn't it? And some of the politicians are like, they demonize investors as well and landlords. And if you got to think, if you force these investors out of the market, it's actually going to be tougher for renters.
100%.
So you need landlords in there, and you need to give pathways for renters to buy, and you need to make it easier for first home buyers for sure. And hey, you got to build more property, and perhaps just be a little bit more sensible on the immigration.
That's for sure. So the $1 million question before we come back from the future is, 30 years ago was the best time to buy a property. What do you think about the current market and right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, lifestyle things that come into when people are actually ready to buy.
Yeah.
You need to have the deposit, you need to have the steady income, you need to have your, affordability under control. But if you could buy now or you could wait, I think it makes more sense to buy now, because what's going to happen is if you wait and rates go down and affordability increases, you're going to have more competition.
Definitely.
So, if all the other metrics are right, I think the time to buy is now.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we saw it, during Home Builder in 2021 when the government was throwing money at people, demand went through the roof, transactions went through the roof, and then obviously it all shut down. On screen right now, you've got the property clock from Matusich, and that's a clock, right? So it just keeps turning. And, right now they're suggesting, as we are today, Sydney's in recovery mode on its way up to upswing. I'm in your camp. I think if rates do come down in the middle to late next year, affordability goes up with absolutely no stock, I think we're going to see another bull run on property. And
I know Brisbane at the moment and on the Gold Coast, there's a huge lack of supply. There's no properties on the market. And when there is a property on the market, it has 5 offers on the first open home.
Wow.
And it's sold that open home.
Yeah.
So there is a big demand, and it comes down to affordability as well. So it's a very interesting graph to see where these areas of Australia are trending.
And any advice now, as we come to the end today, advice for the first home buyers who may be watching this, or who will watch the recorded video of this and are going, I don't know what to do. Advice for them?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the largest amount of money that they're probably ever going to spend.
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared. You need to be organized. So talk to a broker or a bank, talk to your family, and just figure out what's possible. Go and get a loan pre-approval so that you know how much you can spend, how much deposit you need, what are the repayments going to be. And then that'll set you free in terms of where you can buy.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. That's it, everybody, in terms of the slides we had. We might just have a look on the live stream now if we've got any questions from anybody out there. No questions? Even easier then. We'll share your contact details as we go along. And Dan, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody.